Welcome to The Debate. Today, we are examining a piece of source material that, on its surface, looks remarkably simple.
Oh yeah, like incredibly simple.
Right. It's a transcript of a family dinner conversation, and it's specifically designed for English language learners.
Complete with, vocabulary lists, speaking practice exercises, listening comprehension, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. But our central question today goes far beyond just language acquisition. We are focusing on how this text functions as a model of human interaction.
Which is where it gets really interesting.
It really does. So the question is, does this dialogue serve as an exemplar of healthy, supportive family communication? Or does it present an overly sanitized, structurally rigid depiction that basically obscures the reality of actual domestic dynamics?
Right. The classic idealized versus reality debate.
Precisely. And I will be arguing that this text provides a highly functional, positive framework of cooperative family dynamics. It deliberately models active listening, positive reinforcement, and constructive problem solving, specifically to lower the cognitive barrier for learners.
Well, and I will be taking the position that this text relies on restrictive, traditional roles and, honestly, a complete absence of genuine friction. By erasing the natural complexities of human interaction, it ultimately renders itself an artificial and sanitized representation of family life. And that leaves learners linguistically defenseless in the real world.
Okay, strong words, defenseless. Let's get right into it then. To begin, I think we have to really look at the underlying mechanics of what the authors of this text are trying to achieve here.
Right, the pedagogical intent.
Exactly. Because when I read through this dialogue, I don't just see a list of English words. I see a literal masterclass in positive reinforcement and validation.
A masterclass? Really?
A masterclass. I mean, the parents in this script are consistently modeling this ideal form of engagement.
For instance, when the daughter mentions her English quiz, the father doesn't just offer, a passive nod. He responds with, "Excellent! Keep practicing every day."
Which is a very textbook supportive response, sure.
But it's effective. And when the son mentions finishing first in his science project, the mother offers immediate, enthusiastic congratulations.
Right, it's all very nice.
It is nice.
But the most crucial piece of evidence from my position happens midway through the meal. The mother proactively asks, "Did anyone have any problems today?"
Ah, yes, the infamous problems question.
But think about what that does structurally. By explicitly asking for the negative, she creates a safe space for vulnerability. This isn't merely teaching English syntax, It's providing a blueprint for psychological safety at the dinner table. It literally demonstrates how to invite disclosure without judgment.
Well, I look at that exact same sequence and see something fundamentally different.
I had a feeling you might.
I mean, yes, there are congratulations and polite inquiries, sure. But we have to examine the structural reality being modeled beneath those pleasantries. It reads less like a masterclass in communication and more like a reinforcement of outdated, frictionless archetypes.
Outdated how?
Look at the division of labor. It is explicitly laid out in the section where they discuss tomorrow's plans.
Okay.
The mother is tasked with preparing lunch and doing grocery shopping. Meanwhile, the father is scheduled for an important meeting at work. It's incredibly traditional.
Well, they're just common vocabulary words.
Maybe. But furthermore, that alleged safe space for vulnerability you mentioned, in practice, it is entirely hollow.
Hollow? How so?
Because there are no actual consequences in this universe. The son admits to forgetting his homework, right? But he faces zero academic or parental friction because, as he explicitly states, my teacher understood.
Right, the teacher was forgiving.
Which creates a sterile environment, one that might teach basic vocabulary, but is completely devoid of the complexities and, the negotiations required for genuine human interaction.
Okay, let's focus closely on that forgotten homework incident, because I actually think it perfectly illuminates the core of our disagreement here regarding how conflict and resolution should be modeled.
I'm all ears.
The son admits a failure. He says, "I forgot my homework at home, but my teacher understood." The father responds, Next time, remember to check your school bag.
Right.
The perfect calm father.
But to me, this is an exceptional model of non-reactive, constructive parenting. Instead of punishing the son or, shaming him at the dinner table, the father offers practical, forward-looking advice.
He does, yeah. He focuses entirely on executive function, the physical act of checking the bag, rather than framing the forgotten homework as this huge moral failing. By modeling this specific interaction for language learners, the text provides the precise vocabulary needed for de-escalating potential family tension.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
The problem is that the resolution is artificially neat to the point of being absurd. The phrase "my teacher understood" completely erases the reality of accountability.
It just means he didn't get in trouble this one time.
It acts as a narrative magic wand. It just waves away any need for actual problem-solving or linguistic negotiation. In reality, forgetting your homework generates friction.
Usually, yes.
The teacher might lower a grade, right? The parents might have to sign a disciplinary note, or the student might have to ask for an extension. By having the teacher just magically understand, the text robs the learner of the vocabulary they actually need to navigate real consequences.
Wait, how so? The learner is still getting exposure to the past tense of forgetting and the future tense of planning?
Sure, syntactically, but a truly useful pedagogical model must include the language of real accountability. I mean, how do you apologize to a frustrated teacher in English?
That's a fair point.
How does a parent negotiate a boundary or enforce a rule when a child drops the ball? The mechanism of learning requires practical application. Erasing the friction doesn't teach de-escalation, it just teaches fantasy.
I think you're expecting too much from a beginner text.
It assumes a world where mistakes have zero collateral damage. If the primary utility of language is to help us navigate the world, stripping away the friction means we are fundamentally failing to equip the learner for reality.
Okay, I completely understand the desire for realism, but we have to consider the cognitive mechanics of language acquisition here.
Which are?
Well, if you introduce a complex, high-friction scenario, say the son got a failing grade, the teacher is furious, and the son is now grounded, you completely derail the primary function of the text.
You think they couldn't handle the vocabulary for grounded?
It's not just the vocabulary. The goal here is to teach the routine syntax of a daily meal. Learning a new language in a high-friction, complex narrative environment is it's like teaching someone to drive on a busy multi-lane highway during rush hour.
Okay, that is an interesting way to frame it.
Right? It's about pedagogical scaffolding. You have to start the driver in an empty parking lot.
I see where you're going with this.
You remove the friction of traffic so their brain can focus entirely on the mechanics of the pedals and the steering wheel. Here, the text removes the sociological friction so the learner can focus on the syntax.
The basic sentence structures?
Exactly. The father's response, "Next time, remember to check your school bag," provides a highly transferable linguistic structure. Next time, remember to insert verb. That is incredibly useful.
Yes, mechanically speaking.
So the sociological ideal being modeled here, a calm, supportive father and a forgiving teacher, it simply serves the practical linguistic goal of keeping the cognitive load low and the syntax comprehensible.
Look, I appreciate the empty parking lot metaphor. It makes perfect sense from a purely mechanical standpoint.
Thank you.
But here is the fatal flaw in that approach. Eventually, the driver has to leave the parking lot.
Well, obviously.
And if they only know how to drive in an empty, perfectly flat space, the very first traffic jam they encounter is going to cause a crash.
I think that's a bit dramatic.
It's true, though. And more importantly, we have to look at who is paving that parking lot and what assumptions they are building into the asphalt. Because the lack of friction in the child's life directly mirrors the lack of friction in the parents' assumed roles. The entire ecosystem of this dinner is engineered for passive compliance, which brings us to the implicit hierarchy woven into the very fabric of this dialogue.
You are referring to the division of labor we touched on earlier?
Exactly. Let's look at the mechanisms of normative modeling happening at this table. Because language isn't just words, right? It is the transfer of cultural norms.
Absolutely.
In this text, the mother has just cooked a remarkably complex, multi-component meal. She made grilled chicken, rice, vegetables, and a fresh salad.
A great meal.
She serves the family. She receives a polite, "Everything was delicious. Thank you for cooking," from the father. But then, almost immediately, the son demands, "Can we have pasta tomorrow?" And the mother replies, "Sure, that's a great idea."
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. She is just being accommodating to her child's request.
She is modeling a dynamic where maternal labor is assumed invisible and infinitely available.
Invisible, she was just thanked for it.
Notice the syntax, though. The son doesn't ask if she has the time, the ingredients, or the energy to make pasta. He just places an order as if he were at a restaurant.
Kids do that.
But look at the sharp contrast in the tomorrow's plans section. The mother is assigned maintenance tasks. I'll prepare lunch and do some grocery shopping.
Right.
The father's tasks, on the other hand, are granted external status and importance. He literally says, "I'll have an important meeting at work."
Okay, again, they are simply utilizing common vocabulary words. Grocery shopping, lunch, meeting. These are basics.
But the adjective important is doing massive sociological heavy lifting there. It signals to the language learner that the father's sphere is the high-stakes, valuable public world, while the mother's sphere is the endless, uncomplaining, frictionless production of chicken and pasta.
I think you're reading a lot into the word important.
By using these specific archetypes to lower the cognitive load, the curriculum designers are actively reinforcing a highly gendered, restrictive domestic map.
See, I think we need to separate the utility of the text from a modern sociological critique of its archetypes.
Can we separate them, though?
I think we have to. When you are constructing a dialogue for language acquisition, you rely on recognizable, universal concepts precisely to reduce that cognitive load we discussed.
Right, the parking lot.
Yes. The learner already understands the concept of grocery shopping and meetings. Using these familiar anchors allows their brain to process the English phrasing rather than puzzling over some, avant-garde family dynamic.
It doesn't have to be avant-garde to be equitable.
But more fundamentally, I completely reject the premise that the mother's labor is invisible here. The text explicitly goes out of its way to make her labor visible and valued.
By having the family say thank you?
Yes, and by embedding that acknowledgement into the very structure of the conversation. The father specifically asks early on, "What did you cook today?" drawing attention to the effort.
Which is polite.
Later, he says, "Everything was delicious. Thank you for cooking." The family is expressing mutual gratitude. That gratitude is the core structural beam of this interaction.
Okay, but
Regardless of who cooked the chicken or who was going to the meeting, the text is modeling a system where domestic labor is openly acknowledged and thanked. It is teaching the learner the vocabulary of appreciation.
Look, acknowledgement is certainly better than silence. I'll give you that. But a thank you doesn't change the underlying distribution of power and expectation.
Power?
Yes, the father gets thanked and respected for simply existing and providing an important presence, while the mother gets thanked for performing a continuous service.
That's quite an interpretation.
But let's take this a step further into how this actually impacts the learner's ability to speak English, which brings us to the pedagogical utility of what I call compulsory positivity.
Compulsory positivity, you mean the polite phrasing throughout the text?
I mean the curated vocabulary list appended to this text. If you look at the speaking practice and vocabulary sections, the selected words are highly specific and overwhelmingly sanitized.
They're standard words.
Delicious, congratulations, have a wonderful evening, I had a great day. It enforces a mandatory politeness that borders on the robotic. It creates a linguistic environment where negativity simply doesn't exist.
Politeness is the absolute foundation of social cooperation. Building a vocabulary of polite phrasing is how we navigate living together. How can teaching foundational respect be considered robotic?
Because real life is not an uninterrupted stream of congratulations and delicious salads.
Well, obviously not.
If the primary goal of this text is to teach real-life English for daily speaking, as the source material literally claims, then it is failing by omission. I question the value of spending an entire lesson learning phrases like, "Can you pass me the salad, please?" if the learner is never exposed to the language of negotiation, disagreement, or refusal.
But they are learning how to formulate a request.
A request that is guaranteed to be fulfilled in this fictional universe. What happens when the learner sits down at a real dinner table and the chicken is burned?
They probably wouldn't say delicious.
Exactly. Or what if a family member is in a terrible mood, or a sibling flat out refuses to pass the salad? This script provides zero linguistic armor for the actual messiness of human interaction.
Linguistic armor. I like that phrase.
It gives the learner the vocabulary to exist in a 1950s sitcom, but it leaves them entirely defenseless in the modern world where people actually argue, complain, and express dissatisfaction. By removing the friction, you aren't just making the language easier to learn, you are neurologically decoupling the language from its real-world utility.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. But I think you were asking a foundational text to do the heavy lifting of an advanced seminar in conflict resolution.
Am I?
Yes. The mechanisms of learning dictate that establishing a baseline of respect and politeness is absolutely necessary before introducing the vocabulary of friction. You cannot teach the syntax of deviation before you have mastered the standard syntax.
Meaning they need to know the rules before they break them?
Exactly. By practicing phrases like, "How was your day?" and "I'll study tomorrow," the text provides the foundational syntax of cooperation. You have to know how to construct a polite request, "Can you pass me the salad, please?" before you can possibly learn how to navigate someone saying, "No, get it yourself."
Okay, that's fair.
If we overwhelm a learner with the vocabulary of arguments, resentment, and complex negotiations early on, we aren't preparing them for the real world. We are just confusing them. The polite routine gives them a linguistic anchor.
Okay, that is a very strong argument for scaffolding, I admit. You do need an anchor. But we have to consider the psychological impact of linguistic determinism here.
Linguistic determinism?
Yes, the language we learn shapes our perception of reality. By entirely excluding the vocabulary of friction, you aren't just delaying that education, you are pathologizing it.
Wait, pathologizing normal conflict?
Yes, by presenting a family dinner where every single interaction is perfectly harmonious, where every problem is met with, "My teacher understood," and every demand is met with, "Sure, that's a great idea."
You're saying it sets an impossible standard.
Exactly. You implicitly signal to the learner that this frictionless existence is the norm of English-speaking households. If that learner's own household features arguing over chores, or stress about an upcoming meeting, or siblings fighting over the last piece of chicken, they might internalize that their reality is somehow wrong or dysfunctional.
That they're failing at family dinner.
Right. They might think, English speakers don't argue at dinner, so my family is failing. Language isn't just syntax, it is a normative framework. It tells us what is normal.
It is a normative framework, yes, but I would argue that the norm it establishes is highly aspirational in a deeply healthy way.
Aspirational? Sure.
We aren't just teaching words. We are showing what happens when a family deliberately chooses to synchronize. Look at the mechanics of the conversation. The parents are fully engaged. The children are participating in the dialogue rather than, staring silently at their phones.
That is definitely a plus.
Right? And when the mother asks, "What are everyone's plans for tomorrow?" she is modeling how to organize a collective unit.
Synchronizing their schedules.
Precisely. The daughter has basketball practice, the son has math to study. They are organizing their collective lives through clear, unambiguous communication.
Unambiguous, definitely.
I mean, how could one possibly navigate complex family disputes without first mastering this basic vocabulary of routine? The phrases, "I'll study tomorrow" and "I'll prepare lunch" teach the future tense through the specific lens of personal responsibility.
Sure.
Every single character in this script is taking ownership of their role in the family ecosystem. That is an incredibly positive model for anyone, language learner or otherwise, to internalize.
They are taking ownership, yes, but they are taking ownership of roles that have been rigidly assigned to them, and they are executing those roles with a smile that literally never slips.
Well,
It is a simulation of a family scrubbed entirely clean of any human grease or grit. It teaches English, certainly, but it teaches an English that nobody actually speaks when the recording stops, the microphones are turned off, and the real dinner begins.
which brings us to the broader implications of our discussion today, I think. As we look at the totality of this source material, my position remains that despite its idealized nature, this text fundamentally succeeds at its core purpose.
The empty parking lot?
The empty parking lot. It functions as a highly effective low cognitive load framework for mutual respect, positive reinforcement, and clear communication within a family unit. By focusing on de-escalation, mutual gratitude, and organized routines, it provides learners with the essential building blocks where they can master the syntax of cooperation.
Right.
It offers not just vocabulary, but a constructive model for how people can kindly and clearly coexist in a shared space.
And I maintain that the text's reliance on rigid, gendered labor divisions, where maternal service is implicitly demanded and paternal status is externally validated, severely limits its utility and reinforces harmful societal archetypes.
Of course.
Furthermore, by completely erasing genuine conflict, consequence, and negotiation, it presents a sanitized illusion rather than a useful reflection of actual human dynamics. It leaves the learner linguistically unprepared for the inevitable friction of real life outside that empty parking lot.
Yet, despite our disagreement on its utility in the real world, I think we both agree that the text represents a highly structured, deliberate form of communication.
Oh, absolutely.
Every participant in this dialogue, from the parents to the children, is actively engaged in the ritual of the family dinner. There is no passive observation here. Everyone has lines, everyone has a role, and everyone is actively participating in the maintenance of the family unit.
It is a highly choreographed dance. Every step is measured and every turn is predictable. And I think that highlights the immense value of deeply interrogating these everyday dialogues, especially in language materials.
Completely agree.
Because the texts and transcripts we create don't just reflect our social structures, they actively reproduce them, implanting them into the next generation of speakers.
It forces us to ask a profound question about the materials we create and consume. Do we want our foundational texts to be accurate mirrors of our messy, high-friction realities? Or do we want them to be blueprints for our most polite, cooperative aspirations?
It's a tough balance.
We leave that to our listeners to reflect on when they sit down for their own daily conversations. When you trace the lines of your own family's communication tonight, consider what kind of map you are actually drawing.